So we didn't do a sound check. Can you all hear me okay? Somebody post something to the chat if you can hear me. One of the two people watching. All right. While you're doing that, anything in the chat yet? No. If you can hear me, paste anything in there. A 1. Yeah, okay, there we go. Excellent. Hello, says Jesse. Hello, Jesse. So, I asked people if they had any requests for topics they'd like me to cover, and this was about an hour ago on Patreon, so I'm going there now. We'll see if anybody asks anything. Although, to start with, Ed the Willing in Montreal, he sent me an email asking me to talk about Solana. So, I'm not sure the exact timing, but in the last few days, or maybe it's been almost a week now, I unstaked and sold 1/4 of my Cardano holdings, aka ADA. And I did it so that I could put that money into Solana because the Solana price was jumping. And as soon as I made that trade, the Solana price stabilized. And now the Solana network seems to have hit, I don't know if it's a snag or if it's a brick wall. But actually, let's start with Twitter. So if you would, laptop screen, here we are on Twitter. So Solana status, tweeted earlier today. Solana mainnet beta encountered a large increase in transaction load, which peaked at 400,000 transactions per second. These transactions flooded the transaction processing queue, and lack of prioritization of network critical messaging caused the network to start forking. This fork led to excess memory consumption, causing some nodes to go offline. Engineers across the ecosystem attempted to stabilize the network, but were unsuccessful. The validator community elected to coordinate a restart of the network The community is preparing a new release and instructions will be posted in Discord. All right, so scanning down a little bit. Oh, here we go. I don't follow this account, CryptoTex. But, oh, come on. There we are. They tweeted, and this is just a screenshot, unfortunately, so I can't scroll up to see what came before. Solana transactions are about 500,000 times larger in data size than Elrond. So Elrond is a different blockchain, and it's a competing product. Both Solana and Elrond are basically Ethereum killers. They do the same thing that Ethereum does. You know, they're good for DeFi and NFTs and that sort of thing. But they're both much faster and supposedly have much larger capacity than Ethereum and much, much lower fees. That's the big part from my perspective. Ethereum has turned into something that only rich people can use. Anyway, they say Solana transactions are about 500,000 times larger in data size than Elrond. Data that would take 1 second to index on Elrond takes over 1 week on Solana. Data indexing is very important. Elrond is more interoperable and atomic composability's need is reduced by adaptability and level 2. That last sentence I cannot interpret for you. If anybody can, let me know in the chat. I will have you on next week. So, what does all this say? Well, one, I mean, this is a lesson that I've learned. You can look at me again. This is a lesson I've learned a few times, and it is basically this. If you notice that a coin is pumping, it's been pumping for a couple days, maybe it's gone up 200 or 300%, jumping on at that point, you know, it might continue to rise and you might get to ride it for that last part of the rise, or it might be a blow off top and you might be buying in at the top and then it falls down again. Now, if you're a day trader, that's disastrous, but I'm not a day trader. I make a few trades now and then, but for the most part, I'm looking for positions that I'm going to hold. So until today, until like half an hour ago, which is when I learned about this thing with Solana, I thought Solana was a really strong project. And it may yet be a really strong project. I mean, this is a criticism that people make of Cardano. It's that they've got this peer review process. You know, they write academic papers and they submit them and they get reviewed. And it's like, yeah, you can do that, but that's a much slower process than just building something, putting it to work and see if it breaks. And if it does break, fixing it, if possible. Which has kind of been the Ethereum model, you know, ready, fire, aim, fire. And Cardano has been the exact opposite. They want to work out everything in their heads and everything, you know, on paper, and then in a super secret test net, and then in a larger test net, and then deploy it, which is why, you know, Cardano's only had smart contracts for a few days now. I think they launched on Sunday, and it hasn't really affected their price. So you've got one extreme, which is ready, fire, aim, fire. You've got the other extreme, which is work everything out in advance and then deploy. But there may well be some problems that you simply cannot anticipate, no matter how much, you know, you do your peer review thing in advance. Now, I like Cardano. Like I say, I sold a quarter of my Cardano to get into Solana. And at this point, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't. But you know, there's got to be a middle ground, and I suspect that Solana is going to be more of a middle ground than Cardano is, because Solana already has smart contracts. You know, Solana is already up and running, and they started later than Cardano, as far as I know. I don't have their exact chronology, you know, committed to memory. So what do I think, Ed, in answer to your question? What's my opinion here? I don't have enough information. I agree that Elrond is looking like a better level 1 blockchain than Solana right now. Why I don't own any Elrond is because, and this comes from watching Guy on Coin Bureau, the tokenomics at Elrond are sketchy. It seems like the founders or friends of the founders or whoever, they have a pack of whales holding most of the tokens. And that leaves everybody else vulnerable to all manner of shenanigans. Whereas over at Solana, things are distributed more equitably, which is why, I chose to be on Solana. That, and of course, the recent pump is what pushed me over the edge to get some. Alrighty. Let me have a look at the chat. Sound checked without you knowing. I can hear you. I don't know anything about crypto. Are you doing this as an investment or just as a hedge in case the dollar collapses? Okay, that's a good question. This is from Jesse. Yes, it's an investment, but I basically just sold all. I didn't have a huge stock portfolio. I just had a few $100s in stocks, but I just sold most of them. I'm just holding on to AMC just as an FU to the hedge funds and, solidarity with the retarded apes over on Wall Street Bets. But I sold everything else. And, it's making its way from my Webull account to my checking account. From there, it's going to go to Kraken or to Coinbase, and I'm going to get some more crypto, probably just to play around on the different DeFi interfaces, one of which was going to be Solana. And, they could be up and running just fine this time tomorrow. Who knows? I might still be dabbling in Solana, have something to say about it a week from now. But am I doing this as an investment or just as a hedge in case the dollar collapses? Yeah, I'm not going to keep a lot of money in dollars. Period. I mean, crypto or no crypto, whatever. I'm not going to keep a lot of money in dollars. Not that I have a lot of money, but, if I did, I wouldn't have it in US dollars because every one that the Fed creates, all the rest are worth less. And they just seem addicted to, they're not actually printing, paper dollars, those gifts where, the Fed chairman is turning the crank and the dollars are flying out. Those are hilarious, but, we all know that's not how it works. The dollars that are being created are electronic dollars. And even though you don't hear about it on NPR or CNN, the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve are, driving full steam ahead toward implementing their own blockchain-based central bank digital currency. What is it? It's the MIT group. What are they called? Somebody help me out. There's actually Algorand. That's it. I was going to say, I actually own this one, just a few dollars worth, but it's doubled in the last couple of weeks. Algorand is a likely candidate to be the blockchain that the United States central bank digital currency gets implemented on, in which case that coin, the price of it's going to go through the roof. But I'm avoiding the question, or I'm not getting around to the question. The question is, am I interested in crypto as an investment or as a hedge against potential hyperinflation? Kind of an investment, but from my perspective, investment is a very long-term thing that you do. So I have some crypto locked up for 10 years over on Cake DeFi. I've got others, a different tranche locked up for 5 years. I've got some locked up for 36 months. So in those instances, yeah, that's clearly an investment. But I'm also kind of getting the trading bug, so I'm going to keep some free to trade. And the reason for that is I'm 53 and I don't work a normal job. I've paid into Social Security for most of my life, but for long periods I was self-employed, not making that much. And basically the amount that you get in Social Security is commensurate with the amount that you made when you were working, before you retired. So people who made a lot of money working their jobs, they get a lot of money from the government. And people like me who, valued their time, their freedom, and other intangibles over money and didn't spend their lives behind a desk doing the 9-to-5 thing, we get a lot less. So my Social Security, when it kicks in, will be laughable. So I will have to continue to sing for my supper, until I can't anymore. So really, I'm looking to crypto as an investment, but as a high yield investment, as a way to make a nice chunk of change in a short amount of time. As the last time I had a guest on this live stream, as he said, as he said, if you had taken your stimulus check and bought Cardano last year, you'd have $100,000 now. I want to catch something like that. It doesn't have to be $100,000, although $100,000 would be a nice chunk that I could put into a DeFi situation somewhere and generate a couple $1,000s a month in passive income, which would allow me to, do what I want to do, which is get back to international travel, get over to the Philippines, hook up with Rose. Hey, speaking of Rose, let's go to Instagram. And unlike last week, the page isn't working. What? Okay, now it's working. If you would, switch back to the laptop. Come on. Not Geb Earth. Oh, come on. Computers is so stupid. Save your login info? Yes, of course. All right. I was thinking there'd be something a bit more interesting on the screen. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right, forget it. Instagram doesn't like this laptop. All right. Actually, do we have any more questions about crypto? I don't see any. So basically it's this. I'm not terribly worried about hyperinflation of the US dollar. I am investing, but I also am looking to make a fairly sizable return in a short period with crypto, which is why I don't just buy Bitcoin and Ethereum, put it in a hard wallet, and forget about it. All right, so back to the laptop. Let's check in with Peter Zion. All right, where in the world? Split rock and Afghan minerals. Peter Zion sent this out today. He writes, speculation over Afghanistan's potential mineral wealth is just that, speculation. What we do know about the hard reality of the country's geography, infrastructure, and development profile readily explains why we're still talking about Afghan mineral wealth in the realm of potential trillions. It might certainly be there, but no one's done the hard, serious work to find out for sure. And China is certainly not going to be the one to do it. Chinese involvement in Afghanistan isn't going to be fueled by a desire to do serious survey and exploration work, building out roads and rail lines, developing a meaningful power grid, and then getting into the serious work of mining. In a landlocked country, is China then going to truck ores and minerals into Pakistan and or Iran for shipment? Or up and over the Hindu Kush in its sparsely inhabited western frontier, while battling militants and tribal warlords all along the way? Very likely not. America did not leave behind a golden goose in the mountains of Afghanistan for the Chinese or anyone to come along and scoop up. Instead, China's interests in Afghanistan lie in the same bucket of all the neighboring states: security, limiting cross-border militancy, and working toward some hope of containing refugee and militant flows. If you consider that's it. So I posted not the text that I just read to you, but a video in which Peter Zion, walking across barren Wyoming, says roughly the same thing. To which first, regular commenter here, says Peter Zion needs to see this. And he's linked to a video. This is a YouTube video that has 3 million views. I didn't know the video maker before today, but he goes by the name Kraut, K-R-A-U-T. And this is an hour-long video talking about the rise of China. Talking about how China is taking a very long view and also adopting the imperial tactics that got used against it in its century of humiliation. For example, loaning lots of money to countries they know won't be able to pay it back. And then when the countries can't pay it back, China just says, okay, well, instead of paying us back, how about you give us a 99-year lease on that deepwater port? So they did that in Sri Lanka, and then they locked out all Sri Lankan workers. They brought in all Chinese workers to man this port. And the Sri Lankan workers rioted, and China said to Sri Lanka, hey, contain those people. And Sri Lanka sent in the police and, shut down that disturbance, that unrest. Alrighty, so basically first is saying he's countering Peter Zion's larger narrative, which is that China may look like it's going gangbusters, but really it's not viable. In the long term, it's not viable. So I said, I can see why you'd link to this video, Trump's biggest failure by Kraut, as a counter-argument to Peter Zion's larger argument about the viability of China as a global superpower. But Kraut actually reinforces Zion's specific argument with regard to Afghan's mineral wealth. Check out this moment in the video. So let's just have a look at this. This is obviously I'm reading from my Patreon here. You can find these same links by going to patreon.com/KMO. And this is a time-indexed link, so make it so.
Africa has for decades been a continent plagued by stagnant economies and lack of commerce. The reason for this is to be found in the sheer enormity of barriers set up by individual countries. Only 17% of trade by African countries is done with other African countries. Take, for example, Cameroon. Moving goods from Cameroon to its neighbor Chad, a one-day truck trip of 600 miles, costs 6 times as much as moving goods from Cameroon over 7,500 miles to Hong Kong. The tariffs, regulations and taxes in place were created in a post-colonial era by nationalist and socialist African leaders to create national economic self-sufficiency, but in the end crippled many African economies. Incidentally,
Okay. Go ahead and put the camera back on me. So, shipping goods from Cameroon to Chad, a one-day truck drive, they are contiguous countries, costs 6 times as much as the 45-day journey by ship over the ocean from Cameroon's port to Hong Kong. Transport over water is dirt cheap. Afghanistan is a landlocked, mountainous country with minimal infrastructure, no developed highway system, no developed rail system. You would have to build a country before you could go in and mine minerals in Afghanistan and move them out in quantity at a profit back to China. That's Peter Zion's point, and I agree with him. I don't think that China is there to snatch up all the mineral wealth. Think about this. The U.S. has been there for 20 years. If there was a U.S. mining conglomerate that was really lusting after, the mineral wealth of Afghanistan, do you think the Pentagon would have kept them out? Do you think the White House or the Congress would have said no? No, the reason that the U.S. hasn't scooped up all the mineral wealth in Afghanistan is because it's not viable. The infrastructure is not there. And I've got a visual sort of intuition pump for you. Let's look at this. Actually, no need to go to the laptop just yet because something is really slow here. It would be a nothing to look at for several seconds. All right. Go ahead and go to the laptop.
St. Jude is your security.
Ah, no. Commercials. Yes, I need to get, what do you call the YouTube account where they don't show you ads? Anyway. Antelope. I hit an antelope once. My car was not able to drive away from the scene. So, look at this rail infrastructure. Have you ever driven across the United States? Have you ever driven through Wyoming, Utah, Montana, Idaho? These are places where there's a lot of coal. The coal is mostly moved from the mines to where it's consumed, power plants mostly, I would guess, via rail. And you will see, situations like this where you have these rail lines, which are not just one set of tracks. What do you got here? 1, 2, 3, at least 4 sets of tracks parallel to each other, and trains that stretch to the horizon in this very flat region, hundreds of cars loaded up with coal. What would it take to create that in mountainous Afghanistan? I know that, I'm putting emphasis on this, like we've had some disagreement on this topic, and who am I? Who are you? This is not an ongoing conversation, but I think this is an intuition pump, as I say. Go ahead and back to me. It's an intuition pump just to say, look at the vastness of the infrastructure that we have here that allows us to transport coal, from places like Utah, to Texas or to California or, to wherever it needs to be burned. I doubt they're burning much coal in Texas these days, given how much natural gas and petroleum they have. But they just don't have that in Afghanistan. And again, if it was there and easily available, do you think anybody in the U.S. federal, call it imperial power structure, would have said no to American mining interests who wanted to go in and get that mineral wealth? So if the U.S. didn't do it, China probably won't either. They're going to have to be there for the same reason, the same reason we've said we've been there, which is it's a hotbed of terrorism, and China has a lot more to fear from, Islamic terrorists than the United States does. China is locking up who knows how many, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs, moving, force feeding them pork, moving Han Chinese men into the homes of imprisoned Uyghur men, as they've been doing for decades in Tibet. China is very good at this. And China has been pressuring their neighbors, invading their neighbors, dominating their neighbors for 1,500 years. And there's 1,500 years worth of anger at China in that part of the world. The United States is 200 years old, 250 years old. I mean, you could be pissed at the British and extend your anger to the United States because we speak English, but it's not like Vietnam, which has been repelling Chinese invasions for 1,000 years. China is surrounded by countries who have very good reason to hate and distrust it. And, they're throwing a lot of money around trying to overcome that. But there's really only so much you can overcome with money, particularly when the money doesn't get spread around, particularly when you give the money to the big man and the big man puts it in his Swiss bank account and doesn't build the road or the rail line or the deep water port that he said he was going to build with it. And it certainly doesn't trickle down to the people. So the people in the neighboring countries, all the money that's being thrown at these countries, the people living in those countries still don't have much reason to think well of China. But as the video that Kraut put out very accurately establishes, the test case for using money and trade to control a Western English-speaking country is Australia. Australia just happens to be on their side of the world, and the U.S. has shamefully neglected its strategic alliance with Australia. During the Gulf War, I was living in Australia in 2002 and 2003 when the U.S. was invading Iraq, and there were U.S. warships in the port at Perth where I was living. So, Australia was cooperating with that, but the strategic alliance has been left to wither on the vine, or at least so I hear, since then. And at the same time, China's growth, its rapid economic growth, has required a lot of raw materials, and they have been getting those raw materials, particularly the minerals that they need, and the steel, and the beef, from Australia. And many Australian politicians have had to resign because they've taken bribes either from Chinese officials or from wealthy Chinese businessmen in Australia who are closely linked to the Chinese Communist Party. So, China has been subverting Australia for a decade now and doing a damn fine job of it. So I'm not here to say that China is nothing. Peter Zion's line, and, I quote him a lot, because I've enjoyed his books, I enjoy his videos, I'm on his mailing list, so, I get his occasional dispatches. His position is that the 21st century will be the American century, that even though the global maritime peace that the U.S. has enforced since the end of World War II is going away, we are still going to extend that protection to our major trading partners, and the U.S., Canada, Mexico, South Korea, and Japan, and Taiwan are going to be not a global empire, not the hegemon that the U.S. has been in the last few decades, but still a very, very powerful coalition. And that China's attempts to become a global power are, they're built on sand. And I think the best illustration of that is the islands that they have built. They've taken land masses which technically don't count as an island by international law. According to international law, an island, you have to be able to have a self-sustaining community on that island. And some of the, the islands, so-called islands that China has built up in the South China Sea, they couldn't possibly support that. They're classified as just rocks or navigational hazards. But China has gone in, poured who knows how much concrete to create airstrips, deep water ports, military facilities. And they've done this so that they can claim waters that really should belong to the Philippines or Malaysia or Vietnam, claim it for China. And so, they've made all of these artificial islands, which the international community and the international courts don't recognize as actual islands. But China says, well, so what? We're there. We control the space. We don't care what you say. But those islands are crumbling. The cement foundations of those islands are, just after a few years, they're already being withered away, eroded by the ocean. This is not a project that's going to last. They build these so-called ghost cities, these cities where they're just building on the basis of speculation. People are buying and flipping apartments that they've never seen, selling them to people who will never see them. And, these cities are falling apart before anybody is moving into them. So they've got a lot of activity. The central government extends a lot of credit to developers and construction companies so they can keep people employed, so they can keep working. But the stuff that they're building is garbage. Nobody's ever going to live in these things, and they're going to have to be torn down pretty soon. And, nobody in China really owns the property that they live on. They have these long-term leases with the government. So, you buy a high-rise condo, and you're not really buying a condo. You're buying the right to live in it for a time. But, the building, it's recognized that these buildings are not going to be around for very long. So these are, it's not like buying a piece of property. It's not like buying a farm. It's not like buying a suburban house that's built on the ground, a single-family home in a suburb in the U.S. I mean, I get all the criticisms of suburbia. First is in the chat, so we'll see what he has to say to this. But before we get there, Jesse says, does China have to worry about militants from Afghanistan? Not necessarily from Afghanistan, more likely from, the countries on their west, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, the stands. But, these are all contiguous places, and people, and this has been the bane of the U.S., for the entire occupation, that fighters move easily across the mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, where they have safe haven. Pakistan's supposedly an ally of the U.S., and yet that's where Osama bin Laden was living fairly openly. Anyway, Jesse continues. The border between Xinjiang and Afghanistan is very narrow. Are they afraid the Taliban will unintentionally inspire Uyghurs to fight? I don't know about unintentionally. I mean, there's just, I would say, genuine righteous anger throughout the Muslim world at China for what they are doing in Xinjiang. Bill Nuthouse says, China will win. Fair enough. First says, nah, China has less to fear, I'm thinking, from terrorists, less to fear from terrorists. Jesse continues, would the Taliban want to anger China and its ally Pakistan, though? If they take up harboring terrorists again, wouldn't it be against India? Okay, India, that's an interesting and very necessary element to this whole discussion. So, China, I don't have it on the laptop where I can put it up on screen, but I'm going to read just a little bit from a news story from Al Jazeera. China extends $31 million in emergency aid to Afghanistan. Beijing promises grain, medicines, and 3 million COVID-19 vaccines as it urges Taliban to cut ties with extreme forces. China has announced that it is offering at least $31 million worth of emergency aid, including coronavirus vaccines, to Afghanistan as the Taliban revealed the members of its new government. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made the announcement on Wednesday during a meeting with foreign ministers of Afghanistan's neighboring countries, including Pakistan, Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. The emergency aid will include grain, winter supplies, medicines, as well as 3 million COVID-19 vaccine doses, Wang said. In recent days, the Taliban has declared that China will be its main partner in rebuilding the war-torn country. In his remarks on Wednesday, Wang quoted Xinhua state news agency as saying that Afghanistan is, quote, standing at the crossroads, close quote, as it faces humanitarian crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm sure there is no Pashtun person who is afraid of COVID-19. Anyway, I'll stop there. That's just to say, China is already giving money and aid and, with large promises of more to Afghanistan, and I would say largely to stabilize that region and to neutralize the threat before it begins. I mean, what reason did the Pashtun people in Afghanistan have to, want to contribute to the attacks of 9/11? They didn't really. I mean, that was an al-Qaeda thing. Al-Qaeda was training in Afghanistan, largely because Afghanistan was pretty close to being a failed state. I mean, large portions of the country are inaccessible. It's really hard for the government in Kabul to impose its will on the rest of the country. So, China has the same sort of legitimate fear of Afghanistan that the United States should have had back in 2000 and 2001. Jesse asks, would the Taliban want to anger China and its ally Pakistan, though? So clearly there the answer is no. I mean, the Taliban owes its existence to the Pakistani intelligence service. It's Pakistan has nothing to worry, in terms of terrorist attacks birthed in Afghanistan. Does Taliban want to anger China? Well, no. China's Santa Claus. China's there just handing out money and all kinds of stuff. So no. If they take up harboring terrorists again, wouldn't it be against India? Quite possibly. And if so, I think China would incentivize the Taliban and Afghanistan to play a role in that. What I didn't mention, and this is covered, I highly recommend this video that First linked to, the one by Kraut. It's called Trump's Biggest Blunder. And in it, he's describing the transnational trade network that China is constructing with its Belt and Road Initiative and with throwing money at all of these different places around the world, and what they're largely looking to do, other than to secure routes, secure access to oil and other things they need to keep a high-tech country running. They're also locking out India. They're creating trade agreements with all of India's neighbors, basically to, cut India out of the loop. India, I should say, is pretty much a U.S. ally. It is the world's largest democracy. They're not buddies with China. China and India they're in an intense rivalry, but unlike China and the United States, India and China are pretty close to one another. So there's you can't really take the whole China One Belt, One Road initiative and all of their Asia-based foreign policy and all their heavy-handed tactics, all their militarism. You can't really think about all that without also including India. So First says, American culture is in direct opposition to Islam and is what almost all radical groups not funded by the U.S. seek to counter and resist. Uyghurs are the largest foreign group in the rebel/radical pocket in Idlib, Syria. The most compact, capable Uyghurs are thousands of miles away from China, dying for a cause not having to do with China. Also, Zion doesn't take in climate change, as pointed out by some others on your Patreon. Climate change projections do not look good for the U.S. It'll be a loser when it comes to agriculture. If the temperate zones are moving north and a lot of agricultural production moves, first to the northern U.S. and then into Canada, that doesn't worry me. If the U.S. were to, say, be dependent on Russia for its grain supplies, that would worry me. Parker says, China is shooting itself in the foot a lot lately, both geopolitically and economically. Also, hello. Hello, Parker. So I would encourage you to say more about that. I personally, if somebody were to say, how has China been shooting itself in the foot recently? No huge examples leap to mind. I think, the problems that they have are not so much the results of short-term decisions which have backfired, but more just the non-viability of this long-term plan of dominating trade in Asia using, reversed imperialist tactics. Jesse says, I thought they were using Syria as a training opportunity. I just can't comment on Syria. It's not something I focused on. Haven't been reading about it. Haven't been listening to people talk about it. I would be inclined to defer to somebody's more informed opinion about Syria. Parker first says, Parker, that's the U.S. on display for the world to see. Where's the news on China? They have handled COVID well while America is being broken apart by it. Wow. Do I want to get into COVID? Or do I want the stream to continue? Let's see. First says, Jesse, they are locked in Idlib. It's a one-way ticket there from China. This is good for the Chinese as they get to fight and die thousands of miles away from China. That makes sense. First continues, it's not so much that China is rising as America is falling hard. It depends what you mean by America. If you mean America, the global imperial power, I wouldn't say it's falling hard so much as just retrenching, abandoning a lot of its very expensive commitments that nobody else is going to take up. China is not going to take up the commitment to make the entire world's oceans safe for commerce. Let's see. Genitals Clutch says, at first, what's up? What's up, KMO? Well, doing a live stream. It's Tuesday. There's about a little less than 20 minutes left to this. All right, so unless anybody has opinions, questions, comments on the topics of China, India, the South Pacific, U.S. military hegemony, I'm going to move on to cookies. So I'm going to try once again to get Instagram to open the correct account. Oh, it's promising. It's promising, but I'm not going to prematurely ask for the view. Here we go. Okay. Put the laptop on screen. Here's my smiling face. This is my account. So my account used to be full of illustration. I mean, here's a little bit of comic illustration. But recently, I've mostly just been walking around Bellows Falls. Not even walking around. I'm usually walking to the grocery store. And just a little piece of botanical beauty will catch my eye. So pretty soon, the green leaves on the trees here in Vermont are going to start changing colors, and people from all over New England and points further abroad will come here to see them. Many of them in packs, riding on very loud motorcycles, and I will have violent fantasies of disrupting their passage. This is my cat, Mocha. I've been taking her outside every day to get her used to being outside again. I would like for her to become an indoor-outdoor cat again, because when she is an indoor-outdoor cat, she chooses to use the toilet outdoors rather than in the litter box, which saves me work. This used to be a snake. Not sure what this is. I mean, it looks like a seed pod of some kind, but it's, conjoined twins. Best kind of tomatoes are free tomatoes that come from people's gardens. And, in late summer, when they have more tomatoes than they know what to do with, they put them out for free. So I picked up a bunch, ate them in a variety of ways, mostly in salads. These are weeds, but aren't they pretty? That's Pix, one of the characters from Geb. Oh, here's a video. And there's Mocha. There's Mocha's human. So, I don't know how old she is. I was going to call her a little girl. I'm told that she's sub-adult. But she paints these cool rocks with, heartwarming or uplifting sentiments written on them, and she just leaves them around the village. So whenever I'm walking in, I look down and I see one. I'll take a picture of it and then leave it there. Japanese knotweed. It is an invasive species, but it's pretty. All right, there's Mocha again. Isn't she pretty? So what I wanted to do actually was pop on over to Rose's account. Her Instagram is Zennial Rose. She's from the micro generation between Generation X and the millennials, so the Zennials. But she has a cookie baking business, and I think she has not only a knack for, cooking and making good food. I think she's got a knack for food photography. These are all just pictures that she has taken with her iPhone 6. So a week or so ago, she got into making all kinds of banana treats because she had an excess of bananas. But if you would, follow her account on Instagram and like some of this delicious looking food. And you can see I've been falling down on that. You should all have hearts by them already on my account. But she's always posting these amazing pictures of the cookies she makes. And I've never once had one of her cookies. Thus, my intense interest in the crypto markets. I'm looking to make enough money to get some debts paid off and at least get on over to the Philippines long enough to meet her face to face. I was going to say in the flesh, but don't want to encourage the dirty minds of the men listening to this. But I guess there's no such thing as mail order brides anymore, because when you go to fill out a visa application for a spouse or fiance visa, the first question it asks is, have you actually met in the real world within the last 2 years? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. Look at this. Oh, goodness. Doesn't that look good? All righty. So, back to the chat. First says, we should really be paying attention to the supply shortages affecting us here at home. It's a bad sign and things can get potentially much worse. I'd be curious to know which supply shortages you're thinking of. When you say that, I think of microchips. And the U.S. is utterly dependent on Taiwan for, all the microchips, not all, but for a huge amount, more than half, I think, of the microchips needed. And as far as I know, we don't have, I'm not going to say that. I will say, it is clear, the United States is woefully dependent on a country which is claimed by China as part of itself and which, geographically is a stone's throw from China. The U.S., the U.S. military, the Pentagon, they're making plans. They conduct exercises. They have a long-term strategic vision for protecting Taiwan from Chinese invasion, but I don't know that it's possible. And even a failed invasion attempt by China could well shut down that plant. They could destroy that plant, and we'd be SOL. So I absolutely think that, I'll vote for whatever presidential candidate says he's going to move heaven and earth to get chip manufacturing reestablished here in the United States. And in addition to it being a critical piece of our national infrastructure, our high-tech infrastructure, our military infrastructure is dependent on computer chips. Those are high-paying jobs. Those are the exact jobs we never should have shipped overseas. So first says, okay. Parker says, China has been attacking itself economically, shutting down the private education industry and going after their tech industry. Yeah, China has locked up some of its tech billionaires. I think Jack Ma is still in prison. But I don't think they're shutting down the companies, and I don't think they want to shut down the companies. I think they just want to make sure that the founders don't start feeling more comfortable with the Silicon Valley crowd, or the Napa Valley crowd than they do, at home in China. Let's see. First says, more dollars chasing fewer goods. Genitals Clutch, in a message directed at First, says, too many people neat buxing. Neetbuxxing. I don't know what that word means. I'm going to look it up. Go ahead and go back to the laptop, please. We are going to look up neat buxing. Okay, so NEAT is not in education, employment, or training. So neat men are the ones playing video games all day. Men without work. All right. I'm not going to scroll through a long thread there looking for a definition. Let's say neat boxing definition. Definition. Interesting that the top result is Minecraft official site. All right. So I'm seeing lots of references to incels here, so I guess neat boxing is a term of art in the incel community. Let me scroll on down to the bottom here. First, or genitals. Here we go. Genitals writes, neat boxing equals going on welfare, unemployment, etc. I guess that kind of brings us around to UBI, or Universal Basic Income. You know, I liked Andrew Yang as a presidential candidate. I sent money to his campaign. I did not like him as the New York mayoral candidate. He took way too much advice from paid consultants, the same people who, as I understand it, were shaping the short-lived campaign of, what's his name? Bloomberg, Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg was the mayor in New York City when I lived in New York City, and I had no complaints about him as mayor, other than the stop and frisk thing. But I didn't like his presidential ambitions, and I did like Andrew Yang in that period. I didn't like Andrew Yang when he allowed himself to be shaped by Bloomberg consultants when running for mayor of New York City. But that being said, universal basic income. I could sure use the money. I wouldn't turn it down, but it would certainly be inflationary. I mean, if you're putting that much money into the economy all the time, you know, and it would be just magic money. It would be the same sort of, you know, magicked into existence money that the Fed has been doing for the past couple of years. You got to take that same amount of money out of the system somehow. You know, and I mentioned that on Twitter earlier, and somebody just says, taxes. It's like, okay, yeah, but taxes on whom? Who's going to pay those taxes? It's not going to be the people receiving the UBI for the most part. You know, high-income individuals, yeah, their portion of the UBI will get clawed back in taxes, but you need more than that. You need more new tax revenue than that to fund UBI. Where is it going to come from? It's got to come from rich people. The government serves the interests of rich people, so it's a non-starter. It's not going to happen. But even if it did happen, like, you know, as I've mentioned, I have two sons, aged 20 and 17. I don't want them to get UBI. I don't want them to be able to sit home in these years when they are supposed to be starting their working careers, you know, getting bullshit jobs. Like my 17-year-old, he's got a job at a convenience store. I'm damn proud of him. I'm glad that he's doing that. This is the age when, you know, even if he's preparing food at the convenience store, he's not running the register. He's a grill cook. That is not a huge, amazing skill set, but just getting out into the world and dealing with people and dealing with money and working out situations of contention with it, that is invaluable. And his older brother's not doing that, which really bums me out. And, you know, here's another thing which the government can't control. It doesn't matter, you know, what federal policy is enacted on this, but I've been playing Minecraft on a server called Uplift. It's uplift.world, or theuplift.world. Here, we'll have a look at it here on the laptop. Go ahead and go to the laptop. Theuplift.world. If you play Minecraft, you might as well just play over here because you get paid. You get paid money to play Minecraft here on Uplift. This, to me, is a disaster. I mean, so far it's in this closed alpha testing stage, so there's not a whole lot of people there. They're still working out the reward system, but you know, their in-game currency, which is called Upliftium, they will never issue a cryptocurrency, or so they claim. You know, there will never be a Bitcoin attached to the Uplift.world, but they do have their in-game currency, and if you collect enough of them, 1 million of them, you can mint them into an NFT, which you can then go and sell on some third-party marketplace for Ethereum or, you know, Bitcoin or whatever. And then the person who buys it can bring it back here to the uplift and melt it back into upliftium. So people are getting paid money to play. I'm getting paid money to play Minecraft. Wouldn't it be cool if that scaled up to the point where it was just better for you economically to stay home and play Minecraft than it is to go and, run a cash register at Walmart? No, no, that wouldn't be better. That would be terrible. We're at 6:22. I need to wrap it up here. So I'm going to return to the chat and let's see. Parker says, then their wolf warrior diplomacy is lowering their image in many places in the world. I think the places where the wolf warrior diplomacy would damage China's image are places where people already hate the Chinese. So I don't, while I think it's silly, I don't think it's really harming them that much. First says, much better than America's schizophrenic foreign policy that's on display for the world to see. I think those seed pods are milkweed, says Parker. Could be dogbane that is related to milkweed. Cool. At first, let's see. You need to Filipina max like KO. Well, you need to be able to take time off of work, get on a plane, and go over there. So I have not managed that yet. I can't really claim it's a viable strategy unless you've got, cash to spare. General's Clutch also says, KMO, that's going to destroy your fasting weight loss goals. I'm glad nobody mentioned fasting until here, 3 minutes till the end, so I can't spend a lot of time on that topic. Let's see. First says, no thanks, Generals. I wouldn't like this type of LDR. No. The LDR portion of the relationship is to be kept to a minimum. The smart thing to do is not get on the dating apps until you're there. That is advice that I recognized as sound advice, and then I didn't follow it. KMO says, first says, I'm KMO. And I say, first says, but KMO seems happy, much more so than in local relationship potentially. Yes. General's Clutch. Let's see. First says, I tried Interpals. It was a horror show that taught me that American women are not the worst, LOL. Yeah, if you get on a Filipina dating site, you will encounter scammers galore, let me tell you. Rose is from a generation that grew up way more modestly without such a connection to the West via internet. As her nickname, Zennial Rose attests. Yes, I'm not going for, a teenager or a 20-something. General's Clutch says, neat buxing equals... Okay, Oh, yeah, I skipped down to that. I wonder if Rose is Catholic. Yes, she definitely is Roman Catholic. She is from the Philippines. Any girl you meet in the Philippines is going to be Catholic. Oh, I closed the window. Let's see. Here we go. Alrighty. And first... gets the last word. He says, it's a bad time to be a young man. Doors are shut or shutting fast, and the ladders to at least some decent life are all being pulled up and away. First, as the father of 2 young men, I agree, and it is one of my primary concerns. That is more important to me than anything that's happening in Afghanistan. All right, it is 6:25, so perfect timing. We're out. We're done. Talk to you later. Nobody asked me about my haircut either.